Welcome to Whiskey Uncut. I'm your host, Paul, joined by James.
Hey, it's been a while, man.
It has been a little while, although for the audio listeners, it may seem uninterrupted because technically there's a couple weeks of a gap where the audio episode I uploaded it, but it didn't. I don't know.
All right.
There's so
just the people watching live.
Just the people watching live, they'll realize. So I think like the audio people, the last episode is Jameson from.
Oh,
it's like doing.
Wow, it's been a while. Yeah.
It's like the St. Patty's episode,
right.
And that was up, but people they weren't able to see it, so I got it fixed. But today's episode, we're going to talk about Two Soul Spirits. Now, we were planning to do a redo of the last episode where we tried to talk about Watershed.
Yeah.
However, for whatever reason, in the middle of the stream, we lost audio, and there was like 10 minutes of us talking about stuff that there was no recording of. And so,
and more importantly, we couldn't get the audio back on again,
right?
Either. So we had no idea what we had recorded, and we didn't know if we could record anything else.
But we realized we can just wait and redo that episode. We'll get on someone from Watershed, to talk to us about it. So it'll work out better anyway. So before we get into today's episode, there's a couple of housekeeping items, James. So first of all, I want to thank, because we have some new patrons.
Ooh.
So I want to go through the list and thank all our patrons, especially because when we do the live stream, like the video and the audio, typically the Patreon segment, it's like I have to rebuild it whenever we add new patrons. So I want to make sure that like the new people get called out, who haven't been. So our usual list of suspects on the Patreon supporter list is Gregory Spencer, Lorraine Denisi, Dana King, Mark Solomon, Jonathan Richardson, Ray Looney, Brandon Weintraub, Taylor Spangler, Harrison Hamill, Jacob Estrada, Axel Mendoza, Dan Dickhouse, and then we have four new people. We have Liz Botten, Daniel Williams, Emin Akot, and Chris Haynes.
Ah, okay,
Yeah.
good.
So,
I've seen Chris in the Gainesville Whiskey Club post quite a bit, so
yep.
Yeah, I'm familiar.
Oh,
with it.
and Steve 128.
Steve 128.
That's his email. I can't pronounce his name. It's in Chinese characters.
All right,
So I can't.
Yeah.
So thank you guys for supporting the show, and especially to our longtime patrons and our new patrons. So our second piece of housekeeping is a Two Souls giveaway, James, because we're doing one every quarter.
Oh yeah, so
we talked
because
about.
I say we just did one.
Well, we did, but that was the December one. We just kept forgetting to do the drawing. And Taylor Lauren won that one.
Yeah, and did she reach out? I need to know.
No, I need a code. I either need a bottle from you and I can go drop it off to her, or I need a code and I can send her the code.
Okay, one or the other, yeah.
Either way. But so we're going to draw our other one here.
I'm giving away so much whiskey.
All right, and this is going to be 3287, and let's see who that corresponds to. 3287 is David Koo. All right, so he's one of our Facebook. He follows us on Facebook, watches the show.
Oh, and that was a person too that that had very few entries in.
Yeah, they only had one entry.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's pretty awesome.
So
it works.
Of the like 5,000 entries or whatever on here, yep, that he won. So congratulations to David.
Nice. Strong work. We will have a bourbon heading to David.
Yep. So let's get into the show and talk about what you brought today. I think we'll skip the news for this week and new releases, because these are new releases.
This is the important news.
This is the important news.
It. This is why we do this. So this is kind of fun. I mean, we had our spring release just here recently, and we decided to break it up into two parts this time. When you release 3 bottles, you're always worried about one sort of competing with the others. And I wanted to make sure that all the distilleries had like some equal time, and we were able to focus on everybody individually. And so we broke this into part 1 and part 2. Part 1 was last month, and we released this 6-year straight rye whiskey from Wollersheim.
Willersheim?
Woolersheim.
Woolersheim.
Yeah, it's in Prairie du Sac, Wisconsin. They're really actually famous in the area. They make a ton of wine. They're the biggest winery in Wisconsin, as far as I know. Everybody there has stories about drinking their wine. It's very, very well known. But they also started making whiskey not too long ago.
Okay.
And so this is a 6-year. I think it's relatively low rye. It's like 66% rye. And we named this one Wisconsin Waffles, and you'll see why. When you open it, it's like bready and mapley, and then you just get a ton of cinnamon and fruit on top of it. And so that was part 1.
Are we opening these, or do you
Yeah.
have sample
Yeah, no,
open
go for it.
samples? Okay.
And then part 2 of it just opened this past, actually, like yesterday. We just announced it. And these will go on sale next week. We have a double barrel pumpernickel rye, which I was excited for you to try because I don't think you've ever tried a pumpernickel rye before.
I don't think so.
And that's from Middle West in Ohio. And we finished this in our hazmat rye barrel from our first release. And then we have a 6-year, like just beefy bourbon from Rush Creek Distilling in Harvard, Illinois. It's 70 something corn, so it's pretty heavy on the corn, but it's 137 proof or 138 proof. So it's our hottest bourbon. And those two are going to be going on sale here in the next week.
Okay. So these are all coming. These will all be available the end of this week.
Yeah. So the Wisconsin Waffles is already, I think it just sold out. I think when I came up here, there was a ping on my phone and I looked and it was already sold out.
I thought I just looked on your site and it said that it wasn't available yet.
The Wisconsin Waffles.
Waffles.
Yeah,
Oh.
it was available and it's sold out.
Dang.
And that sold out in like 3 weeks. The other two are available.
That's crazy that it sold out that fast.
If it didn't sell out, let me check. If it didn't sell out, we have one bottle. Oh, we have one bottle left.
Okay.
Yeah. So one bottle is available. And
for some reason I thought when I went on there it said coming soon. Oh, that's the Ryo.
That's the Ryo. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Available now, but you're saying there's only one left?
Yeah, there's only one left.
Oh, damn. Limited stock.
We put up a big limited stock sign.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All
And you
right.
can, if you scroll down, you can look at the mash bill. I think it's kind of unique.
Let me pull this up for the people. They can see what we're looking at. It's a beautiful website.
Such a good website.
All right. Is that the mash bill? Nope.
No, if you go down, there you go. So yeah, 66 percent rye, and then you get 22% corn and 12% malt. So there's a fair amount of malt in it, but it's on the lower end of the rye. You know, a lot of ryes now are 80, 90%. The one we're going to try in a second is 80% pumpernickel rye. So a lot of them are pretty high. This one's a little bit lower. You're going to get less of that spice, although I do think there's quite a bit of cinnamon in it. But man, the maple bready notes of this one are just bonkers.
So Liz is in the chat. Hi, Liz. And she said she got the bottle.
Oh,
so
nice.
Let us know what you think, Liz. If you haven't cracked it, crack it
try
with
it.
us.
Yeah, try it with us.
This is oh man, the nose on that, like if you hadn't said waffles, I don't know if I would have thought waffle immediately, but definitely like breakfast, syrupy.
And so it's
man.
So when we went there, just the story behind this bottle,
like
Woolersheim.
bready.
Yeah, Woolersheim was one of the first ones that I reached out to, but it took about a year to a year and a half to kind of make the connection.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, a lot of people haven't worked with independent bottlers; they don't really understand if we're going to be able to help them or not. So I think they probably wanted to wait and see how we did. But when I went there, I tried 2 batches, and I tried every barrel within those runs. And I'm telling you what, man, they are super, super, super tight. Like
Just very consistent.
yeah, like a lot of times I go to places and you try 2 barrels right next to one another and they're completely different.
Right.
So even barrels within a run, these are done on the same day, barreled on the same day, put one next to one another. Sometimes there's a ton of variability. These were all super, super tight, but this one stood out. It had a little bit more like sweet note up front, and then I got this like underlying kind of cinnamon note from it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I bought it when it was about 4.5 years old, pushing 5. So we let it rest in the warehouse for another year and a half. And the longer it went, the richer it got, the more that maple note came out. And this last time, right before we decided to name it and label it, I took a sip of it, sat it down on the table, went outside, did something. And then when I came back and I smelled it, I was like, holy shit, that smells like maple syrup.
Yeah.
And then I started to get that rye breadiness, and I was like, Wisconsin waffles. And so that's what we decided to name it. So it didn't start out like that. It's just something that kind of aged into it.
You know, it's funny because like you talk about the cinnamon spice. It reminds me of, have you ever been to Maple Street Bakery?
Yeah.
They have their chicken and waffles. There is like a slightly spicy chicken and waffles. And I say slightly spicy. I really like spicy food, so maybe it's like hot, you know, for most people. But this is like giving that like so much, just that spice layered in there with like that almost fried chicken bread.
Yeah.
Oh, and the sweetness. It's really, really.
Yeah, the nose on this is just out of the three.
Stunning.
This is my favorite nose.
Yeah.
Like, and it drinks the. We had a comment from one of our affiliates who helps us with some of the marketing. Jess is amazing. Her thing was she loves whiskeys that are consistent from the nose to the palate, and I think this is like what you pick up on the nose is what you pick up on the palate. You get hit a little bit more, I think, with the maple at the end of the pour versus the beginning. But man, it's just a really, really pretty rye whiskey.
Ooh. It's definitely got more kick on the palate from the spice. The spice shows up more, I think, on the palate, but you're right. It's a true flavor profile in terms of it's kind of, I would say like you get a little more of the mapley aroma and then a little bit less on the spice aromatically, and it kind of flips.
It flips.
But they're consistent with each other. And then the finish comes back mapley.
Yeah,
like
it does.
Like the finish comes back nice and sweet. Not overly sweet. It's still dry. I might say this is the sweetest one you've released.
I think it's close.
But I don't.
It's close.
But it's not as sweet as like a double barrel or something like that.
No,
just to put it in perspective for people. Like,
and that's what's weird about it is it is sweeter, but we didn't do anything to it. It's not like I did a double. It's not like I cask finished it in something. Like this is just naturally what it is.
This is just
That's just what happened.
It's just that barrel.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it was not like that when I first tried it. I mean, I always thought it was a stellar barrel. Out of all the ones we tried, I thought it was my favorite. And they had been winning several gold medals right before I went to pick these, so I knew I was picking from a good lot. And these were around the same age as the ones that had won. But this one just stood out. And also, I don't know if
you need to buy more barrels from them.
I have another one.
Nice.
I don't know if you noticed, but there's a little bit of like an apricot note that gives away the pot still characteristic. But I love it because when I was little, my favorite thing to do was to take waffles. And I had those like little Eggo waffles that you would cook at home.
Yeah.
Right? And I would cook those disgusting chemical things. And I would take my grandmother's peach cobbler and I would put it on top. And then I would put maple syrup on it. And it just reminds me of that. There's a little bit of that peachy apricot note in there mixed with the cinnamon and the maple. And it's a really pretty pour.
Honestly, like, it's interesting because, like, for a rye whiskey, I feel like this is kind of out of left field of what, like, if I think of flavor profiles that I go for in a rye whiskey. But I think if you really like bourbon and you're kind of on the fence about rye, this is like,
it's a good entry.
This is like a home run.
Now the next one I will say is more rye, but yeah,
because it is like, I mean, you get all the punch of a rye, but it's just got this velvety hug of, you know,
and I think too,
sugary goodness.
If you are a classic rye drinker, like if that's your thing, this is unique. You get a lot of the spice, you get a lot of the cinnamon kick, and a lot of those baking spice notes.
I should have bought one,
but it's not like, well, there's one left, Paul. If you rush now, you can still get it. But it's not overwhelming. And this is a little bit lower proof. It comes in at 118.4. Mm-hmm. And I think that's actually really nice in this case because
lower proof and 60 proof. It's a low proof.
Because I think when you get, I've said this before on here, I think when you get into the mid 120s, upper 120s, low 130s with a rye,
right,
and you combine that with really, really intense rye spice, it's hard, right? Because then you're getting the proof burn and you're getting the spice burn from the rye. And I think it overwhelms people. This is in that wheelhouse where it doesn't do that. but it's got enough pop. It's got enough proof that if you're like a purist, you're still going to really enjoy this.
Yeah. Add to cart. It's already sold out. No.
Oh, did it just sell?
Ah.
Oh, there it is. I just, it just
Oh
on my phone.
man, who bought it?
Well, luckily you know somebody that owns the company, so you could probably
Yeah,
get a
okay.
bottle.
Maybe
we'll find a way to get
snag a
Yeah.
snag a bottle.
So yeah,
man.
this is the fastest one in terms of sellout for us. This was under a month.
Yeah.
So you're talking about 3 weeks to sell.
So what do you think? I mean, I don't know if you want to divulge to the people out there. What do you think was the driving factor behind that? Because we've talked about before that that there's often a disconnect sales wise between whiskeys that are like nerdy whiskeys that are like that are just like obvious picks. So what I mean by that is like look at a local one of our local stores does a lot of picks, right?
Yeah.
And he does so many picks that I would say his picks become less special in a way. Not to say that they're not good picks, but
You can,
for
you
instance,
can, you can saturate your own market.
right. You can saturate your own market. And what I mean by that is like he has like an old elk pick, right? But then he has another old elk pick. And so because he already did a first old elk pick, and neither of those are out of left field, they're pretty straightforward picks.
Yeah.
You know, I think people get, on the one hand, people are excited about it because it's something they're familiar with, but they don't feel, because they're familiar with it, they don't feel necessarily an impetus to get it right away. Now you go to something that's like super out of left field, like maybe your honey spirit that you released, and now you have to try and explain to people what it is.
Yeah.
Right. And because they don't even know what it is. Right. And so,
Yeah, because most people still just thought that was a honey finished bourbon.
right. And so that demand may not be there right away. So where do you think like this kind of falls? Because if it's sold out in 3 weeks, you know, do you think it's partially because people are familiar with Willersheim?
No, I don't think anybody knows who Willersheim is.
Okay.
Yeah, I think.
Do you think it's the name? Because Wisconsin waffles, I gotta say,
it's good.
that's a good name. Yeah.
I think it's a couple things. I think one, we're coming off the honey spirit, and I think
people realized it's not overly sweet.
yeah, and I think the honey spirit drew a lot of people in. Like that just sold out too.
Okay.
And for something that nobody knows what the hell it is to sell out from us, who, I mean, we've been at this for less than 2 years, right? So from a company that's small and is still gaining traction and a spirit that nobody's ever heard of.
Jonathan Richardson stole the last bottle. Damn you, Jonathan.
Perfect. But just because of that, like, I think it's a little bit, I think there was maybe some momentum coming out of the honey spirit because people tried that, and it sort of put us on the map with a lot of people who hadn't tried our products yet.
Right.
But I do think, you know, we're trying to kind of mimic, like, I've been picking single barrels for years. You pick single barrels for years. The names of the single barrels are part of my, like, what I really enjoy about it. Like, because some of them get pretty stupid, right?
Yeah.
But they're fun. But if you can land on one that is kind of funny and catchy, but at the same time really reflects what's in the bottle,
Right.
I think it's super cool. And
I will say this is
this is
one of the best names in terms of like accurately describing it, because we've had a lot of single barrel picks that are like Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory or something, and I'm like,
not so much chocolate.
Like
yeah. But this one is special in that way. I think it does match. It works.
right.
I think people gravitated towards that. Like when we first started to sell it, I got tons of like memes up with waffles and like dancing waffles. And,
Yeah.
and people love maple.
Who
And
did
so
who did the
I was
artwork?
in
Is
that.
this AI generated artwork on the
No,
sticker, or which we
no.
should show people this?
Yeah,
sticker?
we have a guy, Michael Nicola.
Okay.
And I think he's up in Atlanta now who does all of our label and sticker designs. He's really,
Okay.
really good.
All
So
right.
I usually call
So
him.
shout
and
out to him.
I'm like, Michael, like, this is what I want. I don't know how to explain it to you. I can't draw it because I suck. But this is what I want. And we sort of go back and forth on it.
I like how I'm presuming that the waffle is in the shape of Wisconsin.
It is.
Okay.
Yes, yes.
I don't know what Wisconsin looks
Yes.
like, but I assume.
I think the other part of this too, getting back to what you brought up, is this is exactly the kind of place I want to work with because they are only available in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
They do not distribute outside of the state. So unless you're there and you go pick up a single barrel, you're not going to try them. And you probably haven't heard of them before. But they do really damn good stuff.
Dude, that's really good.
And so,
like,
yeah, to be
that's
able
one of
to
my
like
absolute favorites, honestly.
and I think that message of our company is starting to get out. Like,
Right.
hey, you can try stuff that you've never heard of before. And unless you travel to Wisconsin, you're not going to find this company even. And so I think there was maybe part of that too.
Yeah. All right. So, well, I guess there's no point in talking about it anymore because you can't buy it. It's sold out. Look for it on your local auction site. Someone's going to be flipping it, I guarantee.
Look for it on your black. Probably Jonathan. That's probably why
Jonathan.
You bought the last one. He's going to flip it.
Yeah, Liz says the finish is maple syrup and not quite a traditional rye, but still spicy, which I agree with.
Yeah. And it was funny when I did that, I was like, there's a risk to that too, right? When you put like Wisconsin waffles on it, if it doesn't taste like a freaking waffle, like people are going to get pissed.
Right.
And they're going to write you and they're going to be like, what are you talking about? But so I was really hoping that that note would carry through for most people. And so far it has.
Okay. So now what's...
Yeah. So click on the next one. So we'll just bring these up. So this one is from Middle West Spirits. They were the first distillery that I know of to make a pumpernickel rye. And pumpernickel is something that we actually grow in Ohio. So pumpernickel rye is grown there.
Okay.
So they were the first one to distill a pumpernickel rye. I don't know of any other on the market. I've never seen another dark pumpernickel. They typically release this as a 4-year kind of small batch product. And then they do some specialty releases where they finish it with port, which is gorgeous. It's really nice. But this is a 5-year single barrel from them.
Okay.
And the story behind this one, this is kind of a cool bottle.
So is this in a port barrel?
No.
Okay.
No. So, and if you go down here, I think everybody can see this, right?
Yep.
So if you go down here, it's 80% pumpernickel rye, 10% corn, 5% wheat, 5% malted barley. So this is a 4-grain pumpernickel rye.
Interesting.
And what was cool about this is this was on my short list of barrels that I wanted when we started the company. And I reached out to Middle West and I talked to one of their reps early on and she was like, yeah, no. And I was like, really? And she was like, yeah, we don't give the pumpernickel away. Like, that's kind of their flagship thing. And she was like, and even if we did give it to you, you couldn't put pumpernickel on it. And I was like, really? Like, but I was there in Columbus. I decided to stop in.
You smooth talked him.
Well, the owner was there.
Oh.
And I was like, and I knew he was the owner. And I went up and I was like, dude, like, I love your pumpernickel rye. I've been like drinking this stuff since you guys released it. Got to talking to him. He liked the business model. So he was like, you know what? Let's do this. So they sent me a ton of samples. They were all in the 3.5 to 4.5 range. Mm-hmm. And this barrel was super, super dark. Like, I mean, 2 shades darker than any of the other samples.
I mean, it is for only a 5-year whiskey.
Yeah, it's dark. It's dark.
It's incredible.
And it was rich. And the only thing I didn't like about it was it was still a little youthful and it had a little bit of a bitterness on the end. And I was like, this is a barrel that's been up way high in a rick house. Like, and it just cooked. But it didn't deter me. I wanted it. So we bought it. But I was kind of stuck. I couldn't keep it in the barrel that it was in because I thought it was just going to keep getting bitter. Mm-hmm. But I wanted it to age more because I wanted to get the grain note out of it. So we had our hazmat barrel from our first release, which that rye has become kind of famous now. Like, that's the one you actually can find probably on black market stuff. And
well, so that barrel would have also been used for the hazmat rum, right?
No, that was a different one.
Oh, okay.
That was a different one. And it was just empty. It had nothing. We had done nothing with it. But what was great about that is it had a hazmat rye whiskey in it for 8 years.
Right.
So whatever char was in that barrel was pretty much gone. Right. And so it's essentially like using a neutral cask at that point. So I transferred the pumpernickel into that, let it sit for additional 13 months. And every time I tried it, the grain note rounded out and some of that bitterness came out. And then suddenly it was like, this is perfect. Yeah. And so we just bottled it.
Yep. Only thing you could have done better is ship it to Scotland for 13 months to age it in the appropriate climate.
Age it in crappy cold weather, like with sheep or something.
Yep. Dude,
but it's yeah.
I gotta say, the aroma on this is fascinating because it has a, I mean,
Man.
it smells like it looks. Like it has like this aroma of like rich mahogany, you
Ooh,
know,
mahogany.
mahogany. Like it has what I would describe as an opulent aroma.
I knew you were gonna do that. I knew it. And you know what's funny
does.
about it? I just was texting with my
I mean,
cousins last week, and my cousin Jake was like, "Would Paul describe it as opulent?" I was like, "No, like fuck Paul. I wouldn't describe it as." But yeah, I knew you were gonna go there.
I mean, it has an incredibly. It smells like it's 15 years old. Like
It's dark and heavy.
like I just it gives those characters that you associate with an older whiskey of leather, you know, wood, but not like sawdust, not
No.
like char, not, you know, and it's just
the thing that stood out to me with
whatever
this,
that pumpernickel-y character to it is.
yeah,
you know,
and I think that's what the key is here. It's not cinnamony like you get from a normal rye necessarily. There's some spice in there, but I think it's more, for me, it's more like licorice. There's more anise.
Yes.
There's more clove. There's like those heavier, deeper,
Yep.
like darker baking spices rather than the brighter, sharper ones. And somebody mentioned there's some fruitiness to it that's kind of hard to kind of put your finger on. I forgot exactly what my tasting notes are on this one because it's been a while. Dark and heavy with spice for days, cinnamon, anise, and light cloves mingled with caramel, stewed dark fruit, and subtle apple. And the apple part is interesting because the one note that I loved from our hazmat rye in that first release was there was a green apple note.
Yeah.
And this did not have that in that until we finished it in that cask. But that is my magic cask. I'm going to use it for something else again. And it also took the proof point up on this one considerably. So this is a 126.7.
Yeah, I honestly, I was just like, that's my favorite one. So the flavor profile of this is what I imagine they wanted like Woodford's extra super very rare to be when they added in their older stock, right? Where you get a more dry finish, but the dryness isn't oakiness, right? Like where you give it like this mature profile, this kind of, it's not decadent, like, but it smells fancy. Like
it does.
It smells and it tastes fancy. That's the best way I can describe it. Is like, and certainly the layers to it, the layers are subtle, but they're there. And I mean, if you didn't see, now I'm going to spend all my money buying all your whiskey. Oh, it's not for sale yet.
No, it will open in a week. But and this one we called OH Ryo.
Yeah.
Because everything about this is Ohio. Like the grains are from Ohio. The barrel company they use is from Ohio. Everything is local. Everything is all about Ohio, and the Ohio State chant, the OHIO chant. So that's kind of what we did, and it
everyone knows the Ohio State
and it's just kind of like, it's fun. I'm obviously from Ohio, and so we did it to kind of mimic the chant. But the tie-in is that this is a very inherently Ohio whiskey, and when you think of like winters in Ohio, they suck. They're dark. They're heavy. Like,
did you pour this for me?
Yes. And so it just kind of reminded me of everything about Ohio. But I have to say, I think it's my favorite barrel finish I've done.
I when you told me about this whiskey, I was incredibly skeptical and concerned. I was like,
Why is that?
Because the closest thing prior to tasting this that I would have associated with this is Corsair's quinoa whiskey.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, oh damn.
James
must have hit his head or something before he went to the distillery.
If it's not corn, rye, or like malted barley or wheat, is it just everything fall into a crap bin for you?
Yeah, yeah, no, but I just mean as far as like something out there that I would imagine will smell and taste like nothing but pumpernickel, or
yeah, you thought it was going to be overwhelming, like
right? I thought it was going to be overwhelmingly pumpernickel,
Yeah.
And it's not. It's like a really nice profile.
Yeah.
So
and I think, this is what some of the stuff we want to do. Like it's
you
pretty
left the plastic.
I'm sorry.
I'm gonna have to teach you how to open a bottle properly.
I don't have to open many. I just have to open barrels. It's very easy to take a whiskey and cover up the flavor with a barrel finish.
Right.
Like whether it's a port or it's a cognac or a wine finish or whatever. But these sort of subtle barrel finishes that let a whiskey age a little bit longer without changing the characteristics, but maybe drop in a few notes that you otherwise wouldn't be able to get, I think are really fun. Well, this was much better than I was hoping, even when I had this aha moment to put it in that barrel.
Yeah.
But it was a good way to age it without really adding any extra char to it.
No, I think you nailed it. Jonathan Richardson says he's not gonna flip the Wisconsin waffles because he's a hoarder.
He's just gonna send Paul pictures of him with that bottle for years.
That'd be funny.
We'll put him on the podcast page.
Liz says she has a Middle West dark pumpernickel rye. Have you had that?
That's what this is. If it's they do kind of a lower proof, like 90 proof or 80 proof version of it, and then they have the dark pumpernickel that they do as a port finish.
But I mean, is that available anywhere besides?
I mean, you can get it in Ohio. I don't think the distribution is very wide.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. I used to, whenever I'd fly back to Ohio to go visit family or go to a baseball game or something, I would always stop there and grab a bottle.
So, but this is then also finished in the rye cask.
And it's a little bit older than what they normally release. Most of their stuff is 4 years.
Right.
And most of the other stuff I tried was brighter. Like, again, this was a very heavy barrel. It was rich. It was caramely. It had cooked. There was no question. And so this is a slightly different profile than what you're going to get. It's going to be much denser than their standard dark pumpernickel.
I think, it's interesting. I'm always every whiskey to me either speaks to me as an aroma whiskey or a palate whiskey or a finish. So there's always a standout, right? And I feel like the Wisconsin waffles, the aroma and the finish are kind of the standout to me because it's just such a unique smell of the waffly aroma.
Yeah.
And then it just finishes so sweet for a rye that it's really nice. I think for me, this one, it's the mid palate. It's all those nice, dark, dry flavors. And it's a very consistent, again, a very consistent experience from aroma through to tasting.
And I think the finish really sticks with you on it.
It does. And
it's not like a dry oaky finish, but
No.
it just sort of hangs there for a little bit.
Yeah, it's long. It's
Yeah.
long. And yeah.
So yeah, that one will be, we just announced that. We gave all the specs and we put it up on Instagram yesterday. So if you're a newsletter subscriber, you just got an email about it. There's 185 bottle was the yield on this one.
126.7.
Yep, 126.7 proof. So it's pretty beefy. I don't think it drinks like that though. And that will be available next Tuesday.
Okay. Cool.
So, and yeah, it's funny. Everybody started to do Two Souls Tuesdays on Instagram. And so we had all these hashtag Two Souls Tuesdays going up. And so now we're doing all of our drops and all of our announcements on Tuesdays to kind of fit that. So yeah, so that will go next Tuesday. Now,
right, what's the last one?
So the next one is one that this is the first whiskey we've released that I think you really need to let breathe. And so I've told people.
Is that why you pre-poured it right when we started?
Yeah, I pre-poured it because this is a big ass bourbon. There's no question about it. So this is another small distillery that nobody has probably heard of before. This is Rush Creek Distilling in Harvard, Illinois. Mm-hmm. It's right on the border of Wisconsin. I mean, it's essentially a Wisconsin product.
Dude, 137.4.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
And so they source locally. All the grains come within 40 to 50 miles of their distillery. And it was literally 4 guys walked into a bar and had a conversation that they should open a distillery, and they left and they were like, all right, let's open a distillery.
So here's my question. How come I don't know 4 people like that?
Yeah, they walked
Like,
in and they were like, they walked into the local bar and they came out with a distillery. And their whole idea was to create a distillery that added to the community feel
mhm.
of that area. And I'm telling you, you go to Harvard and there's not a whole lot there, but this distillery like stands out. It's big, it's pretty. You go there, they have a great tasting room. The people are super
Harvard.
cool. Mm-hmm.
This is in
Harvard,
Illinois.
Illinois. Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. I'm
Yeah.
like Harvard College, isn't
No,
that in like
not Harvard College. No, you will be disappointed if you go there expecting Harvard College. But I went there and I was expecting to pick a rye. So one of our affiliates had reached out to us and said that they have a 56% rye that he was able to try and he really liked. And I tried it and it was really, really good. But I felt like it was kind of a standard rye. They also had 100% rye, which I'm going to go back and get at some point. But I tried a bourbon, and I don't know if you want to call this one up, we can show people
yeah.
the specs on this. But this is, I think it's 72, 73% corn. So it's pretty high corn on the mash bill. And let's see, 74% corn, 16% rye. They also do a wheated version of this, but I like the rye because I felt like it balanced out the sweeter end of the corn. And then 10% malted barley. This is 6 years, 1 month, and 21 days because we're precise as hell on the website. That's what we do. And 137.4 proof. We bought it at about 136 proof, so it actually added a little bit since the time we bought it. And this was our lowest yield of the three. It's 144 bottles. So what was interesting about this one was when I tried it at the distillery, the first thing that jumped out to me was like this very bright, again, apricot note. And
Right.
the first thing I said to him was, man, you guys don't use many columns, do you? Or many plates? And he was like, no, we only use 2. And I was like, all right, because I'm getting some like pot still, like juiciness on
Oh
it.
yeah.
And there was that. There was some burnt brown sugar. There was a little bit of that rye spice kick in the back. And then there was this really nice dry oak note. And this happens sometimes between the time you buy a barrel and the time that you actually do the tasting notes to release the barrel. It changes considerably. And I tried this right before the release and I was like, holy shit, there's butterscotch in here now. Like, where did the butterscotch come from? I had not tasted butterscotch on this and I had tasted it 3 or 4 times.
Right.
I had samples from the first time I went and I went back and tried them and there was no butterscotch on it. So something happened between there and a little bit of butterscotch sort of leaked in. And also
Someone went by and dropped some butterscotch candy.
and I was like, damn, like that tastes pretty good. And sometimes you get that as you get a little bit older, especially with wheat whiskey or sometimes with bourbon, you'll run into this butterscotch characteristic that comes out of the barrel. And this built up and I really liked it. But this is the one, again, you need to let this breathe. The longer it sits, the more it opens up. When you first pour it, it's tight. And I think it's ethanol and corn heavy. And the longer you let it sit, that blows off and you get more of those richer, sweeter, kind of fruitier notes that come out of it. And this is one too that can take a couple drops of water without a question.
Well, I would hope so at 130 something proof.
Yeah, but man, the longer you let it sit here, just the more that like brown sugar
Now,
butterscotch note comes out.
That one is gripping on the palate.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I just felt my whole mouth just like, bam, flavor.
Yeah, it's a lot of flavor.
Oh my gosh.
It hits.
That's
So I don't know if you remember me describing.
that's like if you're a fan of like Stag Junior.
See, you're going where I'm going.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, I don't know if you've heard me say this before, but there's certain whiskeys that hit your palate and they almost like evaporate.
Yeah.
And they evaporate with flavor.
That
It just pops and it goes away and you're left with this like just wonderful like assembly of flavor, right?
Yeah.
And that's what this does. It hits your palate, it dries out immediately, and then you get tons of butterscotch and fruit and burnt brown sugar.
that
And it's
Man.
it's dangerous. At 137 proof, it's dangerous.
I think of the 3, I think this one has, it's always funny to me how like higher proof whiskeys, I feel like higher proof whiskeys tend to have more restrained aromas.
It does, yeah.
And this one has a more restrained aroma. Like when you smell this, you're not expecting what you get in the glass. Now, not in a like it's totally different profile, but like, I mean, you could. It's a beguiling whiskey. I mean, it's tricking you. It's tricking you into thinking you're gonna get an easy sipper.
Yeah, it's not.
And it's not. Although it's not harsh in any stretch of the imagination. I mean, it is exactly. It's like, those pop rocks things where it's like you eat them and it takes a second and then they like start going off in your mouth and then they're just gone.
Yeah.
That's kind of what it's like.
We had somebody write us, one of our affiliates write us, and he was like, this is the longest like hug I've had from a whiskey in a really long time. And I think it's the combination of the proof hitting you at the back with that really, really dry, dusty kind of oaky note. And people always ask me, what does this remind you of? What does this remind you of? Do you remember our Ghost Barrel?
Yeah.
It reminds me of the Ghost Barrel. The Ghost Barrel had this sort of dry, dusty popcorn note. The only difference with this is it's brighter.
This is fruitier.
Yeah, there's more fruit on top of it. But that base, that kind of like that dry base that everybody really liked about the Ghost Barrel is this. And I poured them side by side. And if you removed the apricot notes and some of the butterscotch, it was really, really close.
Yeah, I would have said this is like orange marmalade.
Oh,
like,
nice.
Like it's a very intense fruity character to it.
Yeah. And I'll show you the sticker here too for folks. This one we called Bold Rush, and it's kind of fun. We have this little guy panning for gold, and he found a Two Souls bottle.
Oh, nice.
And it's reflective, and so it's a really fun little sticker. But the first thing that whenever anybody would ask me about this, I was like, dude, it's bold.
Yeah.
Like it's a big ass bourbon. This is by far the biggest bourbon we've released. And we released a double barrel that I thought was big. This is big. And to me, out of the three, it's probably the most nerdy because like this is one I would not give this to somebody that hasn't had a whole lot of whiskey. Like you want to sit down, you want to let this open up, swirl it, try it, set it for 5 minutes, come back, swirl it. This is more of an experience whiskey.
Oh, dude, here's the thing. I think your picks are getting better.
Maybe people are giving me better.
Well, that I mean, that may very well be part of it.
I mean, the hope is that you just continue to improve, right?
Right, but I'm just saying, like, I feel like a lot of times, companies come out and they have like one or two picks, and you're like, all right, like that's good, and then everything else
they don't replicate it.
Yeah, and I would say like everything you've done so far is separate from everything else in terms of flavor profile, character, or whatever, to the point where like I feel like you're going to have people like begging you for re-releases of stuff.
Well, we already do.
Which like obviously like you can't re-release a single barrel, but you can approximate or try and get into a similar vein or flavor profile or something if you want to.
And that's what I wanted to kind of I'm glad you brought that up because that's what I kind of wanted to emphasize with these. Like the Wisconsin waffles is its own thing.
Right.
Like we don't have anything that resembles that. You can write me 7 times and I'm going to tell you the same thing. Nothing we release is going to taste like that. That's a one-off, right? If you missed out on the Hazmat Rye that we released, which I still think was a phenomenal rye. It's one of my favorite ryes. This pumpernickel has that characteristic in it.
Yep.
I cannot bring back
right
that Hazmat Rye. Even if I wanted to, I couldn't. So this is an opportunity, I think, to try. It has some of that DNA in it, right, from the barrel finish. So if you missed out on that, or if you liked that one, I think this one is really cool. And I sat down and I tried this side by side with that 8-year, and you can pick out the notes that came through, which I think is super cool. You don't get to see that in a lot of releases. And then if you liked the Ghost Barrel, people have written us, hey, do you have more Ghost Barrel left? I'm like, no, like it's a ghost. I literally don't have any. This, I think, is a brighter, sweeter version of the Ghost Barrel.
Yeah.
And so if that was a profile that you dig, you're really, really going to like this bottle. So I'm going to try to make connections to things, and we reuse our barrels a lot.
Right.
Right now I'm going to be reusing the J. Henry, the cigar barrel, relatively soon.
Very nice.
You're going to see those things pop out to kind of make connections. which I think is important because everything we release is single barrel. So you kind of risk everything just being so off the wall different that nobody can relate to them. But I think you're going to start to see the connections between some of the products we release because we've had more time to accumulate barrels that we can use.
Yeah.
But this is, I will say, this is my favorite release we've done. I think all three of these bottles are outstanding in their own
Yeah,
way.
that's what I was gonna say. Is like I think your other releases have been have had standouts, but I think as a 3 bottle release, this is incredibly strong.
So if you were comparing this bourbon to some of our other ones, like how do you think it? I mean, the cigar barrel is kind of the cigar barrel, but
honestly, I think it might be my favorite just because it's got that orange marmalade character to it that nothing else really has, and it's a little, I don't know, like it's just a little brighter without being quite so. Yeah, I don't know. It's hard because I totally see what you're saying about like similarities.
Yeah.
There. I really dig that orange kind of character to it. That's.
I think I like whiskeys that are kind of a conundrum, and when you taste them, you're like, how is this simultaneously sweet and dry at the same time? And I think that one fits for me. Like the dry oak just dries out your palate, like we were talking about, it sort of evaporates, but it leaves you with that sweetness. And I think that's pretty unique. I hadn't tried a barrel that was like this. We've had a couple of our affiliates who have had a chance to write this, send us, or have a chance to try this, write us and say, hey, is this white corn? And I can get why you would think it was white corn because it doesn't have that like sweet corn whiskey kind of note to it. It's got a little bit more of a dry funk to it, but it's not. It's yellow corn.
So what I've realized, as we've been delving more and more into craft whiskeys, and especially with you starting Two Souls and releasing all these craft whiskeys, is when I go back and I try to drink normal bourbon,
it just doesn't quite work, right?
It's like, it's funny because if you had asked me prior to all this craft whiskey coming out, I would have told you like, no, like stuff from from Old Forester doesn't taste anything like Wild Turkey, like it's completely different. But once you start getting into like craft bourbons and stuff, you're like,
it makes the big producers.
It makes the big producers taste very similar.
Yeah.
And not that there's not differences between them, but you just realize like at least anything that you can just go buy off the shelf, very little of it tastes special or unique in any way. There's some standout picks like, we were just drinking Wild Turkey Kentucky Spirit right before this. And like that one is a standout, but again, it's more of a standout from a value proposition, and it's not like it's offering this totally unique flavor profile that you're not getting anywhere else. And so I think the fact that like that's why I really hope Two Souls just keeps taking off, because the fact of the matter is like if I want to go to a craft distillery to go buy some whiskey, I have very limited options based geographically on where I am. And I happen to know a couple of those options are not great.
Yes.
So
especially in the Florida climate, that's a challenge.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And so the fact that you're bringing some of this stuff to market and you're putting your own unique little twist on it. But I appreciate so much the fact that that's not heavy-handed.
Yeah.
And
I mean, this all started because
I would say that
showcase those distilleries.
Right. Exactly. And so I think you've really found a great balance there of showcasing the distillery, adding to it in a constructive manner, and bringing stuff that is unique and feels special So,
and I think what's interesting is, everything we release is craft, so it's inherently going to be very different than your big producers, right? Mm-hmm. But then at the same time, if you go a little more granular with it, everything we release is single barrel. So it's also going to be different than anything you get from that distillery.
Right.
And so, and that's what, we went to a Penelope tasting this past weekend, and the rep who was there was like, "Oh, this is the rarest like Penelope, and it's more rare than Pappy Van Winkle." And I was like, "Mine's more rare than yours." I was like, like rarity is one of those things that people throw out there as kind of a buzzword, but I mean, single barrel is about as rare as it gets, right?
Like 144 bottles, man.
That's it. And you can go to that distillery, you can try another single barrel from them, but it's not going to taste like this. Like I tried every single barrel of this bourbon at Rush Creek, and this tastes different than all of those.
Yeah.
And we just bought a really cool product from like, you're gonna love this, from a distillery in Minneapolis, and I think we're gonna get like 100, maybe 100 bottles out of it, maybe max. And that's all, and it's 9 years. It's 9 years old. So I mean, we get cool stuff, and it's different. And if you're kind of adventurous and you want to try different things and you want to kind of step out of the general like large producer box, I think this is a fun way to do it.
Honestly, like, and that's where I found, because we talked about like our purchasing habits on whiskey and stuff, and how we've both slowed down a lot in terms of buying stuff. I really started to realize as I started tasting more. Basically, honestly, I think it was my trip to Scotland was what flipped the switch in my head initially when I got to try like Lagavulin unmolested.
Unmolested
by Diageo.
Oh boy. All right.
Like it flipped the switch in my head because I'm like, I didn't realize how shitty Lagavulin was that I can buy stateside in the bottle, with artificial coloring, with chill filtration, with low ABV. When I got to taste that straight out of the barrel, it was like the hand of God reached down and,
it's a different experience.
It's a completely different experience. And granted, some of that is like the aura of you're at the distillery and you're, with the little Scottish guy and his cow, and he's like,
it's cow.
Like, so.
And I mean, and that's why, like, we don't do heavy hand. Like, most of the barrel finishes we do are meant to kind of just add a nuance, right? It's not meant to like make it an entirely different spirit. I mean, for God's sakes, we took Watershed and aged it in a second Watershed, right? Like that's about as like true to form as you can possibly be. And so we're doing different things. I'm trying to like add my own little touch to it when I can, but it really comes down to trying to display the whiskey and highlight the whiskey in the best way possible.
Right.
And two of these are just single barrels, and one of them was something I had to find a workaround because I loved the flavor profile, but it just needed more time.
Right. And, kind of what I was getting at is just that at some point, I think the longer your whiskey journey goes, you will eventually arrive at the point where you realize that most of the stuff that's on a shelf is bottled by a committee purely as a product and not as a passion and not as a experience.
Well, and when you blend that many barrels together, you're going to get something that tastes very homogenous.
Right. And so, and so like, it just kind of flipped that switch for me where I realized, and then doing the podcast with you and getting to try more craft spirits, more craft American spirits and stuff, and just realizing that like what I want out of a whiskey has changed, and I've realized that like, when you talk about craft spirits, there's a bit of a disparity between what you're getting relative to a mainstream big producer, as far as maybe you can taste the corn a little bit, or maybe you can taste that it's only 5 years old a little bit because it's a little rough on the edges slightly, but the benefit is you're getting pot still distillation and American bourbon versus column still, or you're getting pumpernickel rye, or you're getting red corn or heirloom, whatever it is. And all of those things are creating these very unique flavors. And so I'm I'm smitten.
You're smitten. I like
Smitten.
it. I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, by the way, go back now and smell the Wisconsin waffles after it's been.
Oh, I did the first one, dude. It smells crazy.
It's like you could pour me like a million different glasses and I would know right away that was that one. It's so like rich and decadent coming out of the glass. It's pretty crazy. And all these, we have 2 rye whiskeys that are entirely different. And then you have a bourbon that's just like bourbon, but it's so much different than anything you pour like off of a big producer, probably, or off of your shelf.
Yeah. Which I just realized whenever we do a whiskey uncut release from Two Souls, that I get a say in.
Well, yeah, and
we're gonna name it Kitten Mittens.
Kitten,
because I'll be smitten.
Just right now, before we even get there, you're just gonna call it Kitten Mittens. Well, you got to try one this past week that I wanted your input on.
It's pretty good.
We bought that one.
You do ask for my input actually on
I do
quite a few of these before.
I mean, I ignore it after I ask for it, but most of the time you're like, no, that's garbage. I'm like, all right, I'll buy it.
Yep.
If Paul hates it, it must be really good.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Well, I'm glad you like these. I think this is a really fun lineup. They're all 3 different.
Yeah.
These were, I should mention too, these were all 3 new distillery partners for us.
Yes.
Yeah. So in the past, we've always had, Watershed coming back or Yahara Bay coming back. These are all 3 brand new.
Although I did see one was bottled by Yahara Bay. So they're getting in there somehow.
They're all bottled by Yahara Bay.
Okay.
They do all of our bottling, so we can't get around that. But none of that. Yeah, but all of these were produced at different partners for us.
Awesome.
I've had these barrels for a long time. I mean, this
for 13 months.
Yeah, this Pumpernickel one was one of the first barrels I bought. It just, we just got it. Just was ready now.
You know what's funny about that is because last closing comments before we wrap up. Although we're doing well on time.
Yeah, I saw we had a few messages.
I think I talked to. Yeah, I think I responded to all those. The Penelope tasting that we did. They were talking about like they pulled. Oh no! It was St. Augustine because we were at St. Augustine Distillery and they were talking about the bottle your own bourbon.
Oh yeah.
And they're like, we pulled this barrel for bottle your own bourbon right when it was ready or something.
Look, and can I say, by the way, I was doing a really good job to not shit on anything in that lineup. And I look over at Paul and Paul's like Paul could not play poker to save his damn life. Like it was the most clear that he was disgusted a couple times.
No, I wasn't disgusted. I liked it better than you.
No, I don't think you did. I don't think you did.
But it was just funny because she made that comment and I'm like, yes, it was definitely ready at 4 years and 1 day or, whatever it was.
Whatever threshold you crossed. Yeah.
It was when it had the perfect amount of plastic hose flavor.
See, that's what I'm talking about. Thanks for proving me right.
Oh man.
And I think that was an interesting, because they were talking about terroir, right? And I'm like, that you are not getting that in this, right? Because the grains from Penelope is MGP. That's not a soil source. It's just where you're aging it, right?
Yeah.
But I think that was an interesting. I've never been to a tasting before where we compared MGP to a small producer.
Yeah.
It was really weird. It was odd. It didn't seem like a good fit to me, let alone
strange.
that the distillery was in Florida and everything they produce is really dark and really heavy, but at the same time, young.
Yep.
And then my favorite part of this tasting, Paul, is they pull out that bottle that they're like, oh, it's super, super rare. And they pour it, and I don't try it right away, and I don't know anything about it. And I'm sitting there, and I pick up my glass, and I look at you, and you're just kind of smiling at me. And I'm like, oh, crap. And I smelled it, and I was like, damn it. It's Amberana. I was like, you got to be shitting me. It's Amberana.
Which, if we're talking about overly sweet,
oh my gosh.
And Amberana and honey barrel.
Yeah,
it's combined.
What? It was a cinnamon honey bun, and
but
it was
rarer than Pappy Van Winkle. So, ergo.
And then I went to a liquor store today, and they're like, "Oh, I was trying to text you. We got a special bottle." And I was like, I got kind of excited.
Yeah.
They're like, "We got the Penelope Rio," and I was like, "I'm
Yeah,
I'm good. You sell that to somebody else, man."
I will say that's one of those whiskeys that you try. And I texted this to my friend, although I texted him a picture of the Saint because they had the Saint available to try. Because here's the thing, I've been talking crap about St. Augustine bourbon for a long time. It has improved. It has improved. I can give them that. It is much better than it was when I tried it 8 years ago when it first came out. However, I had never tried the Saint, and when they had that available at the very end to taste, smart, because everyone was a little buzzed, so everything tastes better by that
And
point.
you didn't taste it in the initial one, so it's new,
right? So it's new and unique. But I tasted that, and my one of my friends had been saying, he wanted to have like whiskey tasting here, and he's like, and my dad has, a couple of nice bottles like the Saint and that he could bring, and I'm like, cool, like I've never tried it, but again, not the best poker face when it comes to whiskey. I think he could kind of tell that I was like hedging my bets on that. I wasn't like, oh fuck yeah, I can't wait to try it.
Bring it.
And so I texted him and I was like, yeah, I got to try it, and he's like, what did you think? And I was like, I can see exactly why 90% of people are willing to pay $200 for this.
I can't.
I
for
can't.
the life of me, I cannot understand.
Because here's the thing. It tastes like an old fashioned. It tastes sweet.
But worse.
Well, yeah. But the thing is, most people don't like whiskey. Like you have to acknowledge that the vast majority of people that go to St. Augustine Distillery are tourists in St. Augustine. They're not people interested in whiskey particularly. They're like, what's something to do? And TripAdvisor's like #1 St. Augustine Distillery, because they have rum and gin, and everybody likes alcohol.
Yeah.
But very few people actually like to drink whiskey neat relative to the total population, right? Obviously not our audience. And so for those people, you take something and you put it in an old-fashioned barrel, and it's super sweet, and it doesn't
taste like whiskey.
It doesn't burn like whiskey. It doesn't taste like whiskey. And they're gonna eat that up like.
But to get to $200 though, like
comes in a fancy bottle.
That's true. If it was only in a box, you could probably do 300.
Dude, I'm surprised they don't put it in a box.
But I think that's my thing, right? Is
and it's the only one in the world aged in an old fashioned barrel, according to them. That's what the guy told me. I don't know if that's true.
I understand why people would like it because of the sweet. But I don't understand why people would then stretch to $200. Like, I think that's just buy the rum. You know what? The barrel aged rum is actually really good.
They sell $15 sugar cubes, James.
That's true.
Those sugar cubes they had, $15 for 5 sugar cubes.
Those were I got to correct you.
Or 6.
Those were elderflower sugar cubes.
Yeah, that's what they said.
That's why
they were like they're infused with bitters. They're bitter infused. I'm like, so I'm paying $2.50 per sugar cube because you took a dropper and dropped bitter. That's what you need to put on Two Souls website.
Yeah, we should do two Souls infused
sugar cubes. Put a drop of
from all of our releases that have sold out.
Oh, dude, that'd be sick. I mean, that was like Macallan level of bullshit of marketing of like, here's a candle that we named after a building on the Macallan estate. Pay us $150 for
the first horizontal candle.
Yeah, the first horizontal candle. Like, oh my gosh, come on.
Oh yeah, it was good. I do see it. Is there a comment about Rush Creek over there?
Maybe
from Liz.
I would really like if Macallan sponsored our podcast. They never will.
They're going to be in the same as Buffalo Trace with us.
Yeah. Lisby says, what's shipping free with Rock Creek bourbon?
Oh, with the Rush Creek one?
The bourbon like?
So we are doing a special on that one. I don't think we've announced it yet, but since Liz asked, I will tell people.
Okay.
So we are doing, if you buy, so we're going to do a bundle. If you buy the pumpernickel with the Rush Creek, you get free shipping. And so on two bottles like that, you're saving like $20 to $25 depending on where you're at.
Okay, cool. And Jonathan Richardson says, absolutely manufactured a St. Augustine souvenir. Yeah. I mean, that's what I mean. It's like, it's an expensive, fancy bottle. that people will like because they don't like whiskey. And granted,
Yeah.
like I honestly didn't think it was as bad as you did, but again, I wouldn't categorize it. It's more of a liqueur
Well, just
almost.
everything tastes the same. Like
Yeah,
their
well.
their core bourbon has such a distinctive flavor to it that I don't care what you do with it.
Yeah,
It sort of
Yeah.
tastes the same.
but
know?
I gotta give them credit for improvement because it is better than the last time I tried it. The
Yeah.
first time I tried it, it was undrinkable.
Yeah.
This
yeah, I
time
can
it
see that.
was just not my thing.
Yeah. I,
So.
I can drink their gin. I can drink their rum. I think their barrel aged rum is actually really good.
Oh, some of their other spirits are great. Like
Yeah.
I really enjoy some of their other.
I mean,
stuff.
if you're gonna make a sugarcane rum, like Florida's a good place to make, or sorry, a sugarcane vodka. Like this is a good place to do it. And
Yeah.
their vodka is actually pretty solid.
Yep,
Like I
their
mean,
vodka's good.
it's vodka, but it tastes good.
Yep.
So.
All right. Well, that's enough of that. Thank you for bringing these.
Yeah, and thank you,
Thank you for leaving them here.
Thank you, Jonathan, for taking Paul's bottle. I appreciate that. That's awesome.
So I think I should send out a sample of these in the tasting kit
Yeah,
to our patrons. So
Yeah.
All right, cool. And again, thank you to our Patreon members. And remember, like, share, subscribe, whatever. Tell your friends because we are getting more people watching, but we need a lot more people watching.
Yeah, I'm doing my best. Everywhere I go, I hand out cards. So I'm doing my best.
All right. Until next time, remember, drink, share, enjoy.
Cheers.
Cheers.